And they took 2 Rolls-Royce Merlins, and stuck it on the thing so it had an enormous amount of power. It was very light. The thing could do 400 miles an hour.
A couple years have passed, and land became available, and I built another line company here in the city.
Essentially looked like something like a big long oil drum, and it was just full of explosives, and you drop it down.
And this wooden airplane.
And several members of the post had served in one or the other of the units that I served in during the Civil War.
They outgunned the Panzer III a number of times. It started with a 37. They could get it up to a 50. But it didn't get any bigger than that.
And people loved this poster. But despite the love of this, they figured the safer sample would be the J. Miller Tower.
Good evening, Blue Group. I'm so glad to see you tonight. We have a couple of housekeeping issues to talk about before we get going. Let me introduce myself. I am Mrs. C.J. Reese. People call me Pat. We're going to meet my husband at our gravesite in that corner of the cemetery later tonight. And Jack Reese, if you don't know him, he was the president of Continental Motors. I know he knows who that was. He spends a lot of time at the Heritage Museum on Western Avenue. Yes, so we will meet him later. And yes, Reese Playfield on Creston is named after us. Jack and I left an amount of money for the city after we were gone. I died in 1976, but I prefer the 50s. That's when I was very active in the community. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself as we go along. Many Muskegon men served in the Civil War and now reside in our City of the Dead. American Legion Post 9 tells me there are 93 Civil War veterans in this cemetery. This evening, I would like to introduce you to Lieutenant Colonel Bennett. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I'm Mrs. Pat Reese, and this is the best tour group of the evening.
Good evening, Miss Reese, and thank you for joining us. My name is Lieutenant Colonel John Bennett. And I, like many other veterans here, reside here in Evergreen Cemetery. If you look around, you'll see flags placed all around the cemetery, noting veterans who served our country. I was laid to rest here in 1917, having my wife nearly next to my side, my wife Larathia. I, however, have 2 gravestones, one at my head and another at my foot. I'm particularly proud of my footstone as it lists both my company and when I served. It's rather small and beginning to be buried with a little dirt obscuring but it still holds great importance to me. Many Muskegon men fought and served for the Civil War. As a matter of fact, in 1861, the Muskegon Rangers were formed, drilling in the downtown area on Western Avenue near where your Century Club is now. The men drilled hard and were ready to muster out in only 6 short months. I, however, was not immediately associated with them. I ran away from my grandfather's Grand Rapids farm and enlisted in the Illinois 2nd. We fought gallantly through Illinois, through Kentucky, through Tennessee, where we met up with the same Muskegon Rangers. Both of our units had suffered many, many losses and the units were folded together, us becoming part of the Muskegon Rangers. That's when I became a Muskegonite. I was lucky. I served in the Civil War and came home almost completely unscathed. After the war, I was a druggist. But one thing I remember greatly was the parade that was thrown for us upon our return. All of the lumbermen all across Muskegon Lake took their saw blades off of their mills, hung them on the sides of wagons, and banged on them with hammers. Must have made a wonderful calliope of sound. The parade was led by a portly attorney named John Snow riding a huge fat white mule. Of course, this being a lumberman's parade, this parade was to stop at every single tavern along the parade route. By the 17th stop at the corner of Western and Pine, some of the men thought it might be a good idea to bring the mule into the bar and see if it could hold its liquor as well as the men. You can imagine what happened. The mule drank vicariously, splintered the bar to pieces, kicking and braying, and all the men fled out, thus ending the parade. Of course, this was not an unusual occurrence, as most parades ended with a lumberman's brawl that would splinter the inside of the bar. This one just happened to be ended by a mule. As I mentioned in between the wars, I was a druggist, but I never hung up my military coat. As in 1898, the Muskegon Riflemen were formed as the Spanish-American War was looming on the horizon. That's when I was bestowed the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, having served earlier in the Civil War. I drilled my men and we mustered out to Cuba to fight. I was fortunate, as were my men, as none of my men succumbed in battle in the Spanish-American War, although I did lose 12 of my men to malaria on the trips there and fro. After the war, I served as county treasurer and also as a county food inspector. Being such a busy man, me and my wife never had children, enjoying each other's company in peacetime. Now we lay here silently together, only seeing people ever so often, like your good folks yourselves. Of course, I've always been a busy man, and I have other events to attend to, so I'd ask that you be on your way while I attend to those. But it's great to see you. Thank you and good day.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. We are focusing on a broad range of veterans in this year's tour. We're going from the Civil War to World War II. And I'm going to introduce you to Clarence Zalman, or should I say the Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. And you all know who that is. Clarence was born just down the street in 1906 and passed away in 1988 at the age of 81. Muskegon has erected a statue of him. I'm sure you've all seen that at the LST downtown Muskegon. After attending Muskegon High School, Clarence was making a living as a musician in Chicago, but he came back to Muskegon during the Great Depression. In 1942, at the age of 35, Clarence was drafted into the Army as a bugler. His job was to play reveille in the morning and taps in the evening. He thought reveille was pretty boring, so he decided to jazz it up. So in 1943, the Army featured him in the Stars and Stripes, and they declared him the real-life inspiration for the Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of the Andrews Sisters smash hit. This way. Clarence spent entertaining troops worldwide with his boogie woogie style. And after the war, he moved to New York City, But he soon grew tired of the music scene and he returned to Muskegon, where he found work at Continental Motors and he married. He continued to play with local bands for fun. Interestingly, many others claimed that they were the real inspiration for the Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy song, but the Army declared Clarence to be the man, and that's the story. It now goes to him.
Thank you very much.
Eventually, somebody realized this cemetery is too full and it might not be a good idea to put our dead people next to our water supply. And Mayor Chauncey Davis, who has a stone over there near Hackley's, can't quite spot it there, he donated this land, which was scrub. And it was far, far on the outskirts of town. And they moved the first bodies here in 1864. It really was the edge of town. And the Ladies Cemetery Association decided they didn't like the way the cemetery looked. They planted trees, flowers, they put in a fountain, they put in benches, they had a fence all around the cemetery, which is now gone, and we believe that may have been used as World War II as scrap metal, and that's why that is gone now. But they made it into a lovely park, and it's where people would go to get away from sawdust, horse things in the street. This was a pleasant spot to be. All right, let's move along. So this evening, we aim to honor not just soldiers, but their families. We remember the wives, mothers, daughters, sisters, and sweethearts. Mrs. Melba Averill is one of the many at home while her soldier, or I should say soldiers, went away and returned. Hello, Miss Nellie.
Good evening, welcome.
I'm Pat Reese. I wondered if you're up to telling some of your stories.
Oh, absolutely. My name is Nellie Averill, but I was born Melba Farwell. Now please, just call me Nellie. Melba is far too old-fashioned. I was born in Dowagiac, Michigan in 1895, and I moved to the Muskegon area in 1913. When I was 13. I met my husband, Mortimer, and married him in March of 1916. Now, Mort's family had been here for quite a while, and they have a long history of military service here in the United States. I guess you could say it's a bit of a family tradition to be in the armed forces, but I wouldn't say that that's all the family was known for. If you guys have a moment, I'd like to take you up here and introduce you to someone near to our hearts. So my Mortimer's great-grandfather, Dan Averill, was born in 1814 in Canada. He moved to Muskegon in 1856 and actually lived outside of the city for a few years before moving into town. Now, in his much, much later years, he actually owned a confectionery out of Lee's Ferry Dock down by the water. Dan was well known and well loved by the community. They actually gave him the nickname of Uncle Dan. Now, Dan and his wife, Hetty, they were a strong family. They had two boys, Mortimer Sr., my husband's grandfather, and William Averill. Now, both of these gentlemen served in Company G of the 21st Infantry. They fought in the Union Army during our Civil War. After the war, Uncle Dan moved his family out to Kansas. Now, there's a rumor that some of his ancestors, two brothers, had fallen in love with the same woman. And rather than either of them marry her and spite the other, they decided to part ways, and neither of them marry her. So, legend has it that part of the family moved out to Kansas, and I suspect that's why Dan went out that way, to try his luck. Unfortunately for the family, they moved in just down the street from a notoriously famous family of serial killers. You may have heard of the Bloody Benders. They had a one-room home that they split in half with a wagon cover, and they would trick travelers into staying with them, seat them at the head of honor at the table, and then the dad and brother would come out from behind the wagon curtain, bludgeon them with a hammer. The mother and daughter would slit their throats, bury them on the property, and then sell their goods. Can you believe it? Right. Now, that went on for quite a while, but they were eventually found suspect. Dan and Mort, my husband's grandfather, were actually involved in the investigation, and Mort Sr. helped to find 5 of the 9 bodies that were found on the property. From what I understand, recently that property was bought by a gentleman, and he is allowing government officials and historians to go in and see what else they can find. Really interesting stuff. Now, I don't blame them. I think it was enough excitement for the family because they hightailed it back to Michigan after only 2 years in Kansas. I would have also. There's definitely something to be said about a quiet and peaceful existence. So, Mort, my husband's grandfather, was a partner in the O.A. Doan Insurance Company, but he was more famously known as the sealer of weights at the old Haymarkets. He was in charge of ensuring that the weights and measurements of different goods in commerce were accurate, which was a very well-respected and vital service. He and his wife, Electa, had 1 son make it to adulthood, and that was my father-in-law, Frank. You're right over here by him. So Frank was born in 1868 and eventually owned a cigar manufacturing business over on Western Avenue. That business did eventually sell later in life, but my husband, Mort Jr., worked for the same company. I met Mort, we got married in 1916, and we had a happy marriage. In 1922, my daughter, Catherine, who went by Gloria, was born, and a year later we had William in 1923. Tragedy struck. A week or 2 after William was born, he and I both contracted scarlet fever and were hospitalized at Hackley Hospital. My father-in-law, Frank, came home from work on his lunch break and found Mort passed in his closet, a gunshot wound to the head. Now, the family said that possibly he was looking for his hunting gear to go on a trip. I think more likely they didn't want to embarrass or shame the family. Speculation went on in the newspapers about what had actually happened with Mort. We think it was grief. I passed a week later, and they had a dual funeral for Mort and I, which is both tragic and quite romantic. Both of our children did live, although without parents. Gloria lived all the way to 1997. She was married and had children of her own. And my sweet William, in 1942, enlisted in the United States Navy during the Second World War. In 1943, he boarded the U.S. Bristol, which was a Fletcher-class destroyer. The Fletchers were some of the most heavily armed and versatile destroyers in the Second World War. They were mainly in charge of escorting convoys, anti-submarine warfare, and naval gunfire support. They were involved in many different theaters, including the Atlantic and Pacific. The Bristol specifically was in the Atlantic, and they were in charge of protecting merchant ships and naval vessels from German U-boat attacks. On October 13th of 1943, they were escorting a convoy near the coast of the United Kingdom and were hit by a missile fired by German U-boat 371. Now, originally, letters were sent home saying that William was lost at sea, but they did eventually list him as passed that day in 1943. Now, apparently, that U-boat had given some of the other boys trouble as well because they did eventually take it out. And you can see here where the ship that took the U-boat out is actually painting a picture of that submarine on the side of their boat after they took them out. So, yay for our guys. Quite unfortunate, but I'll say as a mother, I'm quite happy to be able to spend all the time with William I want now. There's not a whole lot of information in the books about me, just that I married my husband and passed away in 1923. But I feel very fortunate to have married into the Averill family. They had a long, rich history, were well respected and loved in our community. And I'm grateful to have been a part of that. So thank you all for stopping by and visiting me tonight and hearing our story. I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay in our beautiful necropolis.
Thank you, Nellie.
Thank you.
This is the way we're going now. And I like what Nellie said. I told you I'm Pat Reese. I had things written about me, but it was more modern times. And often the women buried in this cemetery, the only story you get is through the men in their lives. I like to talk a little bit about the iconography in the cemetery. This is a urn with a veil over it. Victorians thought the vessel was a symbol to represent the house of the soul, and the shroud represents the separation of life and death, or the veil between two worlds. Another notable carving in the cemeteries are these spheres. You see this family has 4 and this family has 4. Those were very expensive to carve. They were hand carved out of stone. You had to have money to have those. And if you'll notice, these 2 families seem to be fairly wealthy, but I would point out that Charles Hackley has 6 spheres around his monument. Next up, like the Averill family, the Figge family has many members who have also served our community. Frederick was born in 1841 in Germany, and he immigrated to the United States, and he went west and settled in Milwaukee, which is a little difficult for us to think of as being the West. He worked there for a few years, and then he decided he wanted to try his hand in the lumber business, and he and some companions walked from Milwaukee to Muskegon along the Lake Michigan shoreline. The trip took several days. Fred was a strapping young man. At 19, he weighed 180 pounds, and he did begin working for Ryerson Hills and Company. Looks like you're familiar with that company. His career as a lumberman was interrupted by the Civil War. Fred enlisted in Company C of the 26th Michigan Volunteer Infantry, which was filled with men from Muskegon. So in 1863, the 26th Michigan was assigned to Gettysburg, but they were called away and reassigned before they went to Gettysburg, and they went to help quell the riots in New York City because of the draft laws. So a year later, though, he was captured, wounded, and became a prisoner of war at the Belle Island prison camp in Richmond, Virginia. And at one point, the South could no longer afford to feed their prisoners of war, and they did an exchange for some northern prisoners. He was transferred to Annapolis, Maryland, where he was traded for some southern soldiers being held by the North, and he received $40 in pay for his time spent as a prisoner of war. Eventually, he was transferred to Camp Chase near Columbus, Ohio, and received his honorable discharge. He made his way back to Muskegon. It had been 3 years since he left. He now weighed 99 pounds. He was given a job, and he ended up working for John Torrent, who you might be familiar with. He has a lovely home across from the Hackley Library. But he was given work that he could do at his own pace and allowed for frequent breaks, and eventually he did restore his strength. And he lived into his 80s and spent a lot of time with his grandsons and hunting and fishing. And it's said that Fred still had a lot of fire in his makeup. Well, some of his grandchildren stayed in the Muskegon area to raise their own children, and one of Fred's great-grandsons, Ernest Frederick Figge Jr., they called him Newt, retired from the U.S. Navy as Petty Officer First Class after serving 30 years in the military. He served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and at the same time his own son served in Vietnam. He was a member of the VFW Peacock Post and the American Legion in Ludington. 4 generations of the Figges are represented here at Evergreen, and their relatives are still active in the community today. As you know, not all of our war heroes were on active duty. The war effort in Muskegon was also active in our homes and factories. And I'm going to let my husband, who we're going to meet next, Jack Reese, tell you a little bit more.
Today I walk down the street I used to wander. I shook my head.
Hello, Jack.
Good evening, my dear. How are you?
Yeah, I don't
I I see that my decorating in the living room has been rearranged.
I brought some work home with me, yeah.
Here's our group.
Thank you. Hello, friends. Welcome to our City of the Dead. I am honored to be asked to join the tour tonight, along with many of Muskegon's veterans and their friends and their family. Although I am not a veteran myself, I was invited to be on the tour for my first time to share with you my role in Muskegon at War. With a career in the early automobile industry, I eventually moved to Muskegon in 1931 and took a job in marketing. And in 1939, I became president of the Continental Motors Company. The company, having moved here from Chicago in 1905 as a result of the effort to industrialize Muskegon after the lumber era. Continental Motors mostly made auto engines for the hundreds of small automakers. Back in the earliest years of the auto industry, car makers did not have the resources or the capital to build their own engines. Large machine shops, foundry, engineering were all very costly. Most builders would purchase Continental engines and install them in their cars. Makers like Willys Overland, Hupmobile, Oakley, even Mr. Ford and Mr. Durant used Continental engines before they could afford to make their own. By the time the Depression hit in 1929 and the years following, Continental had ventured into engines for equipment and small airplane engines. We even bought a large piece of land on the hill on the north end of Getty Street and built a small airport to test and store these engines. When them Europeans decided to take over the world, one country at a time, the United States government had come calling for help. We built another large engine plant on the site of the old airport and commenced to building large aero engines. We built radial engines with 5, 7, and 9 cylinders, used in both tanks and many warplanes. We built large V12 cylinder engines, both gas and diesel, also for large tanks, warbirds, and some patrol boats. But most residents did not know that Continental was even tasked with making the famous Rolls-Royce Merlin engine during the war. Although the contract came late in the war and we only got to make 897 of them, a very small amount compared to other makers. For many Muskegon natives, it was common to hear the roar of our engines being tested both day and night. Also seeing tanks, jeeps, and other military vehicles on the facility's test tracks. But, on the other hand, did you know that Continental also made very small engines? I have here, from my private collection, a couple of these small engines. Let me introduce to you one of my favorites. This is Tiny Tim. That is its original name. It is a small, single-cylinder, gasoline-powered engine directly connected to an electric generator. It was designed and used to help start batteries in the field. It was also used to power radios, small lights, power tools, etc. I'm told today not many Tiny Tims exist, so this is very rare. The other is even smaller, a lawnmower engine built by the company after the war. My, would you look at the time. We could talk about engines all night, but you folks have much more to see. So I thank you all for coming. Enjoy the tour. Have a good night.
Now, Jack, remember we're entertaining guests at the lodge this weekend.
I'll probably be working.
Jack works 7 days a week. It's just what he does. I did a lot of community service. We lived in the Occidental Hotel. We never had children. I dressed like this every day. That was my reputation. But on weekends, I liked to go to the lodge that Continental owned in Bitely, and I loved to go hunting and fishing, and I would even wear slacks. This is Potter's Field. Have you heard of Potter's Field before? In this seemingly empty land in the cemetery, it's not so empty at all. It's a place for those too poor to afford a proper burial or had no family to claim them. Headstones, even simple markers, were expensive, and few would have had them. Many who did have them have gone missing due to vandalism, misplacement, time, and lack of care. There are two that remain and have survived the ages. One is for 9-year-old Freddie Fifield, and one for CFG McQuestion. So many more are buried here. Names and families and friends are forgotten. The name Potter's Field comes from the Bible. After betraying Christ, Judas returned 30 pieces of silver to the high priests. However, the temple could not accept blood money, so the priest used it to purchase a field where strangers could be buried, a field that had previously been used for digging clay for pottery. This is how it became known as Potter's Field. Now, I do want to say our friends at City of the Dead have been working to put a monument in Potter's Field to commemorate the souls buried here. So be sure to come back next year to see that.
Do we know how many are buried here?
It's a moving number. There's some research that's been done. We still continue to do some research with what we can find with the city and at the Torrent House. But if you are so moved, we have a fund that we're just a little bit short on. And there's a envelope at the front desk if you wanted to help complete that task. We're very close. Our timing is very good. How are you doing so far?
Good.
Everybody good? So Jack and I lived in the Occidental Hotel, and I think it's interesting to note that the architect of the Occidental and of our Evergreen Memorial Mausoleum was the same person. The mausoleum is our next stop. It was a city project dedicated on Memorial Day in 1929. An agreement was made for the perpetual care of the building and the interests of every purchaser of space within it. That did not mean for a day or two, but for all time, with no additional expense. And although it does appear a little imposing from the outside, inside is a place of comfort for the dead and their families, a place of light and warmth even in winter. Would you like to go inside? We have an opportunity to do that. Yes, they did. They've made improvements. Please go in, Mrs. Martin. Watch the step. It's way better than it was. Yes, new concrete.
Blind spot of regret. There was all these things I don't think I remember. How lucky can one man get?
Well, hello, I'm Charlotte Marsh. However, I was known as Charlotte Gillette before I married Charles. He and I made our home here in Muskegon when Muskegon was transitioning from its lumbering days. We believed in this community and in its people. We saw boundless potential. A city ready to build new, not just with timber, but with ingenuity. Our marriage was 5 years old when Charles founded our company, which allowed me to witness firsthand our company's journey. You see, we found ourselves, like many others here in Muskegon at the time, facing an uncertain future. But Charles saw a chance in our very own kitchen, and it was there that he began crafting leather seals, just like these. Now, the decision to start this endeavor was really a matter of survival, as Charles had lost his job and, well, Our pockets were not deep at that time, but it was also a significant act of resilience. The lumber industry was in decline. The trees were basically gone, and people were leaving this area in droves. Charles chose to stay and build, and that decision directly impacted the local area's economy. It provided new jobs, and it laid the groundwork for Muskegon's future as an industrial center. Now, our little kitchen operation quickly grew, and within a few years, we were able to move to a proper facility on Hudson Street, where today the company still stands. I find that remarkable. For 125 years, C.W. Marsh has been a family-owned business, and today it's Muskegon's oldest surviving manufacturer, and that's quite an honor. Now, during World War II, our leather seals became essential components for tanks, airplanes, and vital equipment that supported the front lines. We understood that every seal, every precisely cut piece of leather contributed to the larger effort of supporting our servicemen and women. Now, many materials were rationed and subject to strict controls to prioritize the war effort. Leather was a crucial material for military equipment like boots and belts, and then various industrial applications as well. And it was under government allocation and control. Because C.W. Marsh produced parts for the military, our supply was prioritized, and we were able to continue our contribution to the war effort. Today, our parts are still in demand. Mining equipment, dams, presses, hoists, pumps, and even NASA all use our leather seals. Now, beyond the factory, Charles had another passion: baseball. He believed in the power of the sport to bring people together, to foster healthy competition, and to give the community a significant boost in public morale and civic pride. So, Charles, along with a few like-minded investors, purchased an area of land on the corner of Peck and Laketon and started a dream to build a first-class baseball facility, a place where Muskegon could cheer on its teams and build lasting memories. Marshfield is more than 100 years old now and is recognized as Michigan's oldest minor league baseball facility. It has witnessed so much history, from our own Muskegon Reds to legendary players like Satchel Paige, and even the remarkable Muskegon Lassies. Today, Marshfield, though, is showing its age. So if you have the means, may I suggest contributing to the Marshfield Fund. Your donation would be a pledge to the past, a commitment to the present, and a helping hand to the future. Marshfield was deeded to the city, and at its original cost, Charles went on to play a key figure in the construction of the stands at Hackley Stadium and to serve on the Board of Education for almost 3 decades. Looking back, Charles and I often spoke on how fortunate we felt to be a part of the Muskegon story. We are delighted to know that the Marsh legacy still serves the community we love so well. Both Marshfield and C.W. Marsh stand as testaments to our steadfast belief in the future of Muskegon. Now, I think I've shined our family's apple long enough, and I think you people have other stories to hear. So I'll let you go, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Scratch my head, lit my cigarette.
I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that recently.
Don't think I remember how
I think I mentioned Jack worked 7 days a week. He'd fly home once a week for some meetings and then come back. We lived in Occidental. He'd go to dinner at the diner and then he'd get driven over to the offices, and he followed the same schedule every day. And he always wore a hat, because when he first started his career, the foreman wore a hat. He figured that was the way it needed to be. And the other thing he did that people don't know, when things were hard, every other Friday he would drive to Chicago with the accounts receivable as collateral and go to a business that would give him the cash to come back and pay the employees. I don't remember how long he did that, but he kept it rolling. This next line, there's several stones that have little lights on them to point out, because I think the iconography is noteworthy, and you'll notice them as we walk along. There's a double headstone for children, and you can see the cradle is there. A rosebud that is not open means a life that was cut short. Lambs always indicate children. This first stone right here, you can't see it so well. There's a little bit of a veil over it, and her rosebud is open but not in full bloom. She was a young woman when she passed. There's a lot of symbolism. If you stop to look at it, you'll start to notice patterns. And I also, when we get to it, I want to point out the Civil War soldiers were entitled to a stone. And if you notice, you'll start to see the same one over and over. It's a curved stone, and it has a badge shape where their name and their unit number would be engraved on that. There's quite a few here. The next person that we're going to meet, he doesn't have one of those stones. Either the family didn't realize they were entitled to it. So all the Civil War soldiers in this cemetery do not have those on hand. There was a very large tree that fell this year, and luckily missed our beloved sister Addie's stone. She's the one with the roses are open but not full bloom. I think she was 29. Okay, I'm going to talk about something a little bit ahead of time. I was going to save this for later, but I do want to point out it's really rather obvious when it's a little bit darker. When you look over this way, you'll see why we call this a city. It has a skyline like a city. You'll see the tall stones and the short stones. And this was a Victorian cemetery, as I mentioned earlier. Families came here for picnics, and it would be a full day event because it took a while to ride out here with a wagon, and they would have their picnics here. It was a nice place to be, and it became so popular that they had to post rules because the picnickers were interfering with actual funerals. And this was a Victorian movement for garden cemeteries across the country, so I'm rather proud that Muskegon had one. Here's the children's stones I mentioned, with the rosebud. The rosebud is not opened, and the lamb. It's a very sad day to bury both of your young children. Another popular icon on stones would be a tree, the tree of life, and of course a weeping willow is the sadness of the life cycle. And another popular icon on stone is a book, like this one. And that might mean they were a teacher or a scholar. And there's a weeping willow. Next on our walk, we're visiting Mr. McCracken. Hello, sir. I'm Pat Reese, and these are our guests.
Good evening, Ms. Reese. It's a pleasure to see you. Welcome, everyone. Please gather around. I am John Boyd McCracken, though I am content to be known simply as JB. Despite this rather grand monument that my descendants have chosen to erect, I in fact preferred to remain private and out of the public eye in my life, particularly in regard to my charitable contributions. However, as I have been brought forth here this evening by the kind souls who organize this event, I shall endeavor to give you a modest accounting of my life here in Muskegon. But before I do, please permit me to introduce you to my family who rest here with me. Beside myself is my darling wife, Mary Elizabeth. She survived me by some 20 years and gained some small notoriety in town as being one of the first women to drive an electric carriage. In 1906, she purchased a Pope Waverly wagon for the princely sum of $2,000, which in your money would be about $75,000. This contraption could travel up to 40 miles on a single charge at a top speed of 15 miles an hour. Quite impressive for its day, I assure you. Besides my wife lies our daughter Ruth, and behind the monument are my sons, Jay Harvey and Paul, and also my daughter Rebecca, along with her husband. As for myself, I was born in the year of our Lord 1843 in the city of Zanesville, Ohio. I was the first of 10 children, only 5 of whom were able to survive until adulthood. Our family removed to Knoxville, Illinois when I was 11 years old, and when I came of age, I attended Knox College. My studies, however, were interrupted, as were so many other men of my generation, by the Great War between the states. And in 1864, my next eldest brother and myself volunteered. We joined the Illinois Volunteer Army. We joined Company E, 138th Regiment, and served for 5 months until the end of that terrible event. I then moved to Chicago, where I completed my studies, and upon the completion of my studies, learned of an opportunity here in Muskegon to become the bookkeeper for the George R. Reynolds Lumber Company. So at the age of 23 in 1867, I came to Muskegon, where I spent the remainder of my days. Mr. Reynolds soon recognized my industrious nature. In addition to being his bookkeeper, he asked if I would operate his grocery store. And by 1875, at the age of 31, I had acquired enough capital to purchase that grocery store from Mr. Reynolds, which I continued to run happily for the remainder of my days. I'm proud to say that we had the lowest prices for cash sales in the city of Muskegon and a very fine selection of salted fish for the Lent season. In 1889, I took down the original structure and replaced it with a fine brick and stone structure that still stands today, known as the McCracken Block, at the intersection of Western Avenue and 6th Street in your current downtown. In my day, I operated my grocery store out of 1/3 of that building. If you visit it now, you will see that 2/3 of that store are now a beauty salon dedicated to the hair and nails of your local women. Times indeed have changed. In 1881, I entered the lumber business myself. Along with my dear friend Horatio Nelson Hovey, we founded the McCracken Hovey Lumber Company, later named the Hovey McCracken Lumber Company upon my passing. But I bore no ill will. As I said, I preferred to labor in private. We were quite successful. At our peak, we produced over 60 million board feet of lumber a year. Does anyone have any idea how much wood that is? If you can imagine 50 of your modern semi-truck trailers pulling up to our doors every single working day and leaving loaded with sawn lumber, that is the amount of wood that we produced at our peak. And we soon realized that we needed to have our own source of timber in order to feed those. So we bought originally 2,840 acres of pine forest in Newaygo County for the sum of $300,000. That may not sound like much to you, but in today's money, that would be over $10 million. Later, as the forests of Michigan began to be depleted, we began investing in the South, and at one point owned over 100,000 acres in the states of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas. And while I am both grateful and proud for the success I had in business in my life, what in fact gives me the greatest satisfaction in my life was my role in bringing forward the Red Ribbon Temperance Brigade here in Muskegon. You must understand that Muskegon grew very rapidly in the 1870s, largely due to the demand for lumber to rebuild Chicago after its Great Fire. And while the city was in fact populated by people such as yourself, industrious, sober folks, there was a significant population of roistering lumberjacks and rivermen amongst us, who could easily spend an entire season's wages in a single weekend of debauchery at our local saloons. One minister was known to have said that there were over 60 saloons in town and was derided for it. So an account was made and it was found there were in fact 84. Myself and some of my friends decided something must be done. So in 1877, we invited the famous reformer, Dr. Henry Reynolds, to come to our town to start our own chapter of the Red Ribbon Temperance Brigade that was sweeping the nation at the time. So powerful were his speeches that by the end of the first day, 600 men came forward in front of a cheering crowd to sign the pledge and wear the red ribbon. By the end of the first week, 1,100 men had signed the pledge. So many, in fact, that the stores of Muskegon ran completely out of red ribbon. Now, as you might imagine, this movement was not popular with the local brewers and saloon keepers. It's said they lost $1,000 for every man who signed our pledge. So they began tying red ribbons around the necks of the dogs and pigs that roamed the streets to mock us. But we didn't mind. It simply allowed us to point out that even the dumb beast knew enough to refrain from demon alcohol. But even in death, life can play two cruel tricks. Do you see that monument over there with the statue of the woman upon it? That is the final resting place of my contemporary, one Gottlieb Ninnemann. Do any of you know him? Gottlieb Ninnemann. He was the founder of the Muskegon Brewing Company. And I understand, strange providence that it is, that name has been resurrected by another contemporary enterprising scallywag of your day. But I digress. We also realized that there was little else for men to do to entertain themselves in Muskegon other than the public houses. So the temperance movement founded the first reading room in Muskegon and also Muskegon's first opera house, which became the center of civic culture for decades to come. Now, I know times have changed, but I personally do not believe human nature changes that much. Do any of you think it might be time to revive the red ribbon temperance movement? I happen to have with me a basket of red ribbons. If any of you would care to take the pledge, please step forward and take a ribbon. I will not ask you to abstain from alcohol for the duration of your life, only for the duration of this tour tonight. Please step forward if you're interested. Come, sir. Come forward, sir. Thank you, good sir. Step right up. And I won't pin it to you. I don't want to cause any bloodshed. I'll allow you to pin it to yourself.
So did McCracken live near where McCracken Street is today?
I honestly do not know that, I'm afraid. Oh, please. There we go. One more. Yes, good. Okay. Raise your right hand, please. Oh, we've got one. You can pin it on after.
She started it already.
That's all right. Raise your right hand. I, state your name.
I, Marcia.
I've never heard that before. Very funny. Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
To abstain from alcohol and all vice.
To abstain from alcohol and all vice.
From this moment.
From this moment.
For the duration of this tour.
For the duration of this tour.
Thank you and enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Mr. McCracken.
See? How did you pass away?
All right. Come along, please. We have a little bit more to do and some great things still ahead. The stone would be just about gone, but they found a way to preserve it, and they put a note on the back that preservation and restoration of this family marker was made possible by the descendants of the Arlington and Marion Lloyd families, which I think is very nice. And I also wanted to point out, I talked earlier about the distinctive shape of the Civil War stones, and you can see one there with the curved top and the badge outline and the name and unit engraved. Very distinctive. You can pick those out. All right, the next part is very moving. We're going to hear from a young man who was a company messenger. So young people served in the Civil War, and this young person ran messages between units in the field. Before we get to him, because he does get nervous and he talks very fast, I wanted to just say, try to listen to his words, and he's going to tell us what the soldiers' camp is about tonight. So when you look around the cemetery, you probably noticed that we have the flags on all the veterans' graves. We placed as many as possible. They were placed by the American Legion Post 9, and I promised myself I wouldn't get choked up, but I'm getting a little choked up. I'm very proud to have the association with them, and they had poppies at the front stage that if they don't sell them, they take donations. I talked to them about what they do with the money they raise from the poppies, and they help veterans with things that the VA doesn't cover. And he gave me an example. There was a soldier, a veteran, retired, who has an oxygen machine at home, but he wanted a portable one, and the VA said, "We've already given you an oxygen machine." So the local American Legion Post 9 purchased him a portable one. So they do some wonderful things with that. So the Civil War stones are easy to pick out. Often there's metal plaques that are flat to the ground or maybe on the back of the family stone. They're usually distinctive. And the American Legion, of course, puts the flags out for Memorial Day and this weekend just for us, which I find very touching. Yes, the draping. That's the veil between the life and death.
Okay.
Flat stones belong to the Balburnies. They had several generations of undertakers in Muskegon for years and years and years, those 3 flat ones. Balburnie, of course, was our mayor who was assassinated in 1899 by a Civil War veteran. The GAR had a tough decision about how they were going to handle his funeral because he was notorious. All right, we're gonna go meet our young messenger. Good evening. Do you have a message from the camp?
I do, ma'am. The soldiers ask for your quiet as they've heard a lot on their days on a battlefield, and while they enjoy visitors, they'd rather not have anything to say. So please take a moment to wave your hellos, but let them rest.
Thank you, sir. Right this way. Did you hear what he said? Our camp soldiers represent the thousands of service members across time who have answered the call. Some came home, others did not. We commemorate their willingness to serve and remember their sacrifice. Members of the cast and crew of our City of the Dead honor not only those from our shared history, but also those in our own families who fought for the ideals of this country. I invite you to take a moment to pause at their photographs and to hold in your heart those in your own family who have served. May their dedication inspire us to work together in the spirit of liberty and justice. I would like to point out my own ancestors from this picture, as Jackie Engel. That's my father-in-law, Robert Engel. He served in World War II, and this is my great-great-grandfather who was a Civil War veteran. He was the last Civil War veteran in Ottawa County. He died in 1942. And it was shortly after that. He was the commander of the GAR, Michigan GAR, for a year. But about 2 years later, the GAR disbanded. They had no more veterans to serve. The Grand Army of the Republic, you all know who that is? It was formed to help Civil War veterans, like the VFW does now. But it's no longer active. They do have a museum, though, in Michigan, yes. Remember that everyone presenting our tour is a volunteer and a member of your community. Please let us know if you would like to participate and help provide tours next year. Funding comes from your ticket fees and donations. We want to thank our sponsors, Harbor Unitarian Universalist Congregation and the Annika Fitzpatrick Fund from the Community Foundation of Muskegon County. Next we will meet Mary Jane Easton. And there she is. Hello, Mrs. Easton.
Hello.
I'm Mrs. Reese, and I bring you the Blue Group.
Ah, welcome to the Easton family plot. My name is Mary Jane Easton, and I've made this my eternal abode since the year of our Lord, 1901. Prior to that, I did spend some time here at Evergreen Cemetery as an honored member of the Ladies Cemetery Association. When this ground was first consecrated, it bore the marks of neglect and disorder. So the ladies of the community formed a society with the noble aim of creating a space of tranquility and beauty, a fitting tribute to those who've gone before us. It warms my heart greatly to observe that this hallowed place continues to be tended with such care, and I pray that such devotion shall continue. I was born in the year 1824, My dear mother departed this life when I was but a child, and I was thereafter reared by my aunt in the state of Illinois. I was a diligent pupil, and at the age of 15, I was appointed to the honorable profession of schoolmistress. In due course, I entered into matrimony with Mr. Robert Patterson Easton. Together, we were blessed with 3 children, twin girls, Mary and Myra, and a son, John Mills Easton. We moved to Muskegon in the year 1856, shortly before the outbreak of the war between the states. Now, Mr. Easton engaged in the pursuits of insurance and real estate, and he held interest in several sawmills. He also rendered service to our village as street supervisor, or street commissioner, and he served 2 terms as village supervisor. We established a home on Clay Avenue, and not long before my passing, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of our union. Now, I'm given to understand that the theme of today's event is Muskegon at War. Now, I departed this mortal coil before the Great War, but, and I'm not supposed to tell you this, as a grandmother, most concerned for her progeny, I was able, believe it or not, to observe my grandson during his time of service to our beloved country. We who dwell beyond the veil may on occasion behold that which we wish to see, believe it or not. My grandson, John Mills Easton Jr., affectionately known as Pete within the family circle, served in France during the World War as a corporal in the 130th Mounted Artillery Police. Now, young Pete earned a measure of distinction for himself in Muskegon through the letters that he wrote to his father, which were published in the Muskegon Chronicle under the title Letters from the Yanks. When our brave boys were sent over there, such correspondence brought solace to many anxious hearts. His letters appeared from July to October of 1918, and the editor of the Chronicle remarked that Pete's letters were among the most engaging of all the communications received, for he employed his talents in composition and typewriting to admirable effect. And I would love to share some excerpts. We have just enough time to share a couple of them. His letter that was printed on October 5th read, I don't know whether with all my affluence I can stop to write letters today. We were paid, and it's hard to concentrate when your pocket is full of wallpaper representing francs. The wealthy feeling is inflated. For instance, I drew only $15.10. In French money, that's 88 francs and a fraction. And it takes a wagon to pull it around. But all of it put together wouldn't buy a healthy bar of chocolate. I did a little typewriting, he says in another letter, for one of the older natives the other day. He offered me some money, but I refused. Now, in order to square himself, he's brought in a 3rd bottle of wine in a period of 3 days. Now, if he would only bring in 1 bottle of good wine, it would suit us better. I'm no judge of wine, I am young yet, but this stuff we buy here doesn't bat 780 with any of us. And this is one of my favorites. The soldiers of the different outfits aren't giving us much trouble. Once in a while, some bird gets all ginned up and becomes obstreperous and has to be locked up. The other night, some fellow from one of the different organizations billeted here was full of gin and fight. It was after hours when soldiers should be off the streets. And when he saw one of our boys ready to pounce on him and put him under arrest, he jumped through an open window and into the front room of a house. It transpired that this particular room was occupied by a colonel. So it is needless to say he was arrested as he almost fell into the colonel's arms. Now, Pete was honorably discharged in April of 1919. And in the years that followed, he pursued a career in banking, entered into matrimony, and was blessed with 4 children. In his later years, he retired to Winter Park, Florida, where he departed this life in 1979 at the age of 87. War is indeed a sorrowful affair, and none hold it in fond regard. Yet if any good may arise from such tribulation, perhaps it's the renewed appreciation for those things we hold most dear. our loved ones, the steadfast support of family and friends, our cherished communities, and above all, the blessings of peace and liberty. I do thank you most kindly for joining us in this place of remembrance. It's the hope of this former schoolmistress that you've gleaned some new understanding today, or perhaps recalled a truth long forgotten. Thank you for being here.
I'm drowning in a thirst gone wild. My heart is learning to walk. My heart is learning to talk. My heart is growing like a weed. And I hear my heart is crying. There must be something more she needs. I wouldn't ask it of you. There is an earthquake in me. You get lost, and how would I find you? Well, the rain's coming down. The fields are lush and green, and I'm out looking for the light in the road. My heart is learning to walk. My heart is learning to talk. My heart is growing like a weed. And I hear her crying. There must be some more she needs. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.